Welcome everyone to this week's IPLD Weekly Sync. It is September the 30th, 2019. This week's IPLD. And yeah, as every week we sync stuff between team members, and if there's any other agenda items, we just go through them and discuss them. But we start with going what we did last week. So I start with myself. I worked mostly on the Zebra stuff for Rust. There is a prototype for it, which is linked in the notes, but it needs a special version of the CBOR parser, which probably won't be merged upstream. So it's just, as I said, a prototype. And why it is this way can be read in an exploration report I wrote and have also the pull request linked in the notes. And so the short version is that Surday, the major library in Rust that does the serialization and deserialization, doesn't support tags, but that's something we need for the CBOR encoding stuff. And therefore, you need to hack it into the library itself, which isn't a good solution. So I will try next to convince the people from Surdy to actually implement tag support. We'll see how this goes. Yeah, that's all I have. Next one is Eric.
So I've been having a ball lately, mostly with trying to figure out how to do natively typed, pleasant to use builders for IPLD nodes that have been made by CodeGen, which is itself a mouthful. And trying to figure out how those should look and how they can be both correct and good performance and feel good holistically, like be ergonomic, is really turning out to be a noodle maker. It is, I think some of the territory that we're probing with this is legitimately very nearly uncharted. I've been comparing to lots of other systems that do some kind of code gen in Go, and lots of things use pointers to represent optionality, which is one of the few tricks that you can possibly use within the limitations of Go syntax that everybody's going to at least recognize, but it's also really janky. It's not correct to our model. The ergonomics are surprisingly not great. And the performance is also, now that I've been looking at it in detail, not great. If you have to always have something that's going to almost certainly turn into a heap allocation every time you want an optional field, that's just like concretely really bad. It turns out some of my first drafts of different ways we could do builder patterns, I was trying to figure out, like, oh, if I do a struct literal here versus functions here, is the function overhead going to be like really bad and painful? Turns out, no, it's actually totally irrelevant, like nanoseconds that can be disregarded compared to the cost of creating a bunch of pointers that fail escape analysis and cause heap allocations, represent optionals that are present. That's actually the dominant cost of the system that I've tried so far for Cosm. So that's kind of wild. Like, that just blew my mind, because this is what all of the other things out there are doing. Like, if you use the CodeGen for protobuf in Go, it spits out things where it uses tons of pointers because they have like an optional integer field. It turns it into a pointer to an integer. I'm actually staggered that this is how the world works now. Just so, long story short.
My guess would be that they're prioritizing ergonomics over performance.
The thing is, the ergonomics also completely suck, though. If you want to get the pointer to, I mean, sorry, they do. Like, if you want to get a pointer to an integer in Go, you have to write yourself a helper function, basically, because you have to put it somewhere in some named variable in order to take an address of it. You can't just put an ampersand in front of the number 1. That doesn't compile. So So it's all bad. So I think my desires are like up here, and what's physically possible is probably somewhere way below that. And it's just, I'm still trying to convince myself to settle. So there's a GIST that has a bunch of those options explored at least a little bit, which most of you have probably already seen. The performance is really interesting. And so out of all this, I still don't have a final solution, but it's, questions are getting asked and answered, so it's getting closer, I hope. I would really like to do something that is more ergonomic than what it seems to be centering it around, but my hopes and dreams are probably for a barrier that's impossible. I've been thinking fondly of Ruby syntax lately, which, if you know me and my opinions about programming languages, is quite a statement. But yeah, Ruby syntax, we don't have it in Go. What can I say? Moving on. Hopefully something will come to a concrete resolution on this in the next week.
Cool. Thanks for the update. Next one is Rod.
So I did a little bit of schema stuff last week. Not much. And I spent a lot more of last week diving into Filecoin and trying to figure out how it's using IPLD and its block encoding and all that stuff. Interesting. I'll say that it's interesting. So I don't feel like I've had the most productive week, like producing things. I've also had, I've been dealing with neck and back problems for months now. I had a particularly bad week last week, so that's impacted my productivity. So not that happy about how much I've got done. So hopefully we'll have a better week this week. That's me.
All right. So next one is then obviously Michael.
Hey, I was off for 3 days last week, so not a ton. So a few things. We need to send the SSZ feedback this week. So there's a Google Doc that I think y'all are added to. Need to figure that out and get that sent over to them soon. Here, I lost the window. Okay, here we go. The few days that I was on, I got caught up doing a lot of metric stuff, so not as much IPLD work as I wanted to get done. I did have enough time to work on Unix OSV2 to recognize that schemagen has to be rewritten at this point. It was a quick hack that turned into a bigger hack and a bigger hack and a bigger hack, and now it's really starting to show. So there's just a much better approach that the whole thing can take, and a much cleaner one. It just needs to happen. So that's going to be a few days of my time. This kind of thing is significantly easier to do in JavaScript than in Go, luckily. So I only need a couple days to really run it. But that's like a few days where I'm not making progress on anything else. And yeah, that's all that I have for my updates. Just as a discussion topic, though, I'd like us to talk about documentation. In particular, we really just don't even have docs right now. We don't have anything that I would like call docs. And it's unclear where that should go. Like there's an empty docs repo that I deleted. There's a book that has like a half of a page in it. But there's a website that is wildly out of date. We need to kind of pick where documentation should go. In Q1 of next year, we'll probably do like a bigger push on writing it. But I don't want to stop anybody from writing documentation this quarter if it's something that you feel like you want to do. Or, we end up talking with somebody and, I'd really like this thing to be documented better before I talk to this person so that I can point them to something. I want us to figure out where that should go now so that if people want to do it in this quarter, they can, and they aren't blocked on it. So yeah, I think my preference at this point, because we have basically nothing, is to try and put stuff into the book so that we can at least keep in mind some kind of linear narrative for people learning this stack, rather than just a hodgepodge of a bunch of pages on things, but open to other people's suggestions. People don't have strong opinions about docs, really? This is the only group of programmers that doesn't have opinions about docs.
Oh no, it's just a hard one.
Agree.
The problem with investing in the book is because it's so separate from everything else, and everything feels so early, that it might be difficult to keep it in sync. Like I can imagine getting out of sync within a week.
Sort of depends, right? I think the data model's stable. I think like introduction to data structure stuff is pretty stable. I don't think that we should start covering many APIs yet, like actual language APIs. I think in like another few weeks, I think schema syntax will be stable enough that we can start doing it, that we wouldn't be. I know that we have a few additions landing pretty soon, and maybe a couple small changes, but schemas seem pretty stable. We could definitely start documenting how to write schemas.
We could also document that in the specs repo.
That's kind of what my thoughts too. It's spec and user facing docs are a little different, but having two separate repos for it seems like there's only 4 humans in this chat right now, right? Like we can't, if we try to split our attention between an excessively large number of repos, we just won't. Right, we also have the IPLD repo right now and the specs repo, and then the other ones that you already deleted. But even those two, are we paying attention to both of them? No.
Well, yeah, I don't know what we use the IPLD repo anymore. I mean, other than having just like a landing repo, I don't think that we really use it.
Yeah.
Everything lands in specs now. I think like, look, I don't want to change the coordination point for us or frankly for other implementers. So the specs repo will remain the place where we document things for other implementers. And we definitely should not jump to writing user-facing docs for something that we don't even have documented for the implementers. This whole conversation is about documentation for people outside of implementers, for people that would want to just use something. So if somebody wants to use schemas and not be implementing schema like generation libraries or parsers, this would be a resource for them. And I definitely don't want that to go into the specs repo. I do want to maintain that separation. But yes, nobody should take on doing this unless they have a clear reason, like they're literally working with somebody to adopt this or something like that.
So I agree it should be a separate repository, but currently there is basically, as you said, there's not that much to put in there because like currently IPLD is certainly not end user facing because like, well, there's no implementation for it. Like for most of the stuff, there's no implementation. So at the moment, you can use the old stuff, but yeah.
So it depends on who we mean by, like the audience for this is very broad, right? So like we could write better documentation for the Filecoin folks who are using schemas right now and keep adding features that don't map with our thing because we don't have our thing documented for them. We have it documented for implementers. Like we've been talking to the Ethereum folks a bit. If we want to do a bigger, if they seem open to actually adopting some of the stuff in Ethereum, then we would want to produce better documentation for them as well along similar lines. Yeah, I agree that like the things that don't have the implementations, we should not try to document. That is certain.
So it's basically more about the like at the point would be mostly about the general concepts, more or less, because this is basically what we have and what is agreed upon.
Yes. So like our whole way of thinking about building data structures in IPLD is not really documented in a way that somebody could understand. Like we have some documents in the specs repo that outline some vision stuff and some other sort of guardrails, but like unless you've been with us for a long time, you don't really understand that. Like that's where we reconcile with like Stephen, like which direction that things are going in, right? It's not like something that you would present to somebody who had not done this before. And I think our conversations with the Ethereum folks have made it like really clear that we've established a lot of terminology and an approach to these data structures that just isn't communicated very well. And that can be documented today, right? Like that's not a feature that hasn't landed or something, right? Like the difference between nodes and blocks and our, the way that we address things, the way that we, the way that we handle compatibility between different block formats using CIDs. Like this is all stuff that can be documented that is just not clear to anyone outside of this group. So if we expect people to adopt it or understand it, we would need that documentation. And I think that this is becoming a bigger problem, not just with external folks like Ethereum, but even with people over on Filecoin. Like they're heads down doing Filecoin. They're not like, up to date on our terminology and data model and stuff.
I think one of the highest value adds that we could get would be like focusing on a one-pager approximately amount of content that's just intentionally an introductory like narrative structure and goes over a bunch of those things you just enumerated, and just has like maybe a sentence for each of the things, and is like, in IPLD we have this concept space, it's for handling this task. If you're interested in this user story, start here, and like just like a very small routing information like that. And then just dump people back to specs after that. And yeah, that's not the complete documentation story we want in the long run, but it would be just having that sort of table of contents that's focused on user stories would be a huge step forward, I think.
Okay. I think that's also somewhat an endorsement of the book format as well, then, because I would want that to be laid out more linearly. Like you want to understand this before you understand that kind of a thing.
So my advocation at the moment is for a page though. So like a book format's irrelevant.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
got a bunch
so I mean, like, so in the book, yeah, in the book repo, we can have a one pager that is the sort of introduction and then lays out the linear structure. And right now that'll just link to a bunch of specs, but at some point in time, it would link to pages within the book. And we're not going to replace those all at once too. So it would be nice to have that linear structure to kind of know which chapters need to go in. But while we don't have them, here's a link to the specs.
Right. I would still just put that in the subfolder in the specs repo for now until we have more content. Like when we've got way more content than new repo, fine. But while we've got relatively little, I'd rather have it in a single repo so it's that much easier to write a link checker against. Right, because like link coherency in CI, if you've got two repos, is a bad place.
I don't know. I'm pretty torn on this. I've just had quite a few times lately where I've improved something in the specs repo, and that information did not make it beyond the four of us. So in some ways, that is like where this information goes to die if we're talking about private messaging. So yeah.
Fair.
Is anyone going to read our book though? It's the same problem.
Yeah. I mean, at least we have a thing to point people at. Like we do not currently have a great landing page to point people at. The website is not really in line with our recent work. Even the IPLD landing page is pretty out of date. And until we're willing to put in enough time to replace all of those resources, we can't completely swap them out. But it would be nice to at least be working towards that.
If we start with just a single page or something, wouldn't it perhaps even make sense to basically make this kind of like the website? Because like the current website is just like wrong. Like it's just like if people come to the website, that's not what IPLD is.
I feel like the website should be renamed to multiformats.ipld.io because it does describe multiformats pretty well.
Yeah,
in the context of IPLD, it describes multiformats really well.
because I mean, obviously, people would go like if people want to get like even if you have the book, they will go to the website. Obviously, I mean, the normal entry point is the website, I would say, and then they find that's not of interest to me because like it does something completely different.
So let me kind of recalibrate. Yeah. Let me kind of recalibrate because a lot of this stuff needs to get fixed. I'm targeting kind of next year to fix most of it. What I want to do is like, if in the next 3 months we need to write one of these pages for a reason, that it goes somewhere that is actually working towards the solution of these larger problems rather than contributing to it. That's just my main goal. Like, I don't think that we're going to have anything that anybody's going to see that we don't specifically link them to. That said, that link should point them to a thing that we want to continue linking them to, not to a thing that we're going to move in 3 months.
Yeah, but I would say that's not going to work anyway. So if I write a page about, I don't know, about selectors, for example, because this is what I currently work on, I would put it somewhere in the book repository, perhaps, but we surely find out that this is not the right place for this thing. So I don't know but anyway, like I'm totally open. So I don't care if the repository is called doc or if it's called book, whatever.
I think that would go in the specs repo for now.
It creates a problem. There's a decision problem then, right?
Oh man, yeah, I know.
Yeah, I think maybe I'm something along the lines of Eric's suggestion of, like, we're investing a lot in the specs repo. We're putting a lot of stuff in there, and we are trying to improve even the user-facing nature of a lot of the docs. But it's not discoverable. It's not something people are going to go digging through. So having something that serves as a jumping-off point for more detail on things, that could potentially be expanded over time. But you know, if we work on something that it's probably going to be more than a page, but describes what IPLD is, some of the philosophy behind it, and goes into a little bit of detail about each of these things and says, if you want more information, then you should go to this place, have a look at this resource, and then we know we've got one place to have detail, and we don't have to do the deduplication effort. I like the idea of better docs, really do, but I don't see how we can keep something that's verbose updated as we're changing stuff in multiple locations. It's just going to get out of sync really quickly.
Yeah, maybe the thing that we do is
in a year we'll be back doing this again, saying, "Oh, we need to do a week-long dive into our docs and get them updated again."
Okay, maybe the thing to do here is to just do it in the specs repo, but make each of these a README. So like the thing about how to write schemas is just the README in the schemas directory. The thing about how to write selectors, or the ideas behind selectors, is the README in the selectors directory. And then we can differentiate for now between more user-facing stuff and more implementer-focused stuff, just based on if it's a README or not. Okay, let's do that, and then we'll get more content, and then once we have more together, we'll decide what we want to do. Okay, cool. All right, sounds good. Good decision. All right, we have 1 more minute. Anything else? Cool. Okay. Cool.
Then I will end this meeting on time and stop the